At 31, I stood outside my own house with a suitcase and a shattered heart. The porch light flickered, mocking me like everything else that had unraveled in the last 3 weeks. My breath hung heavy in the early evening air, and even though I'd tried the key twice, I knew before the third attempt that the locks had been changed. Not jammed. Not faulty. Changed. That small metal betrayal confirmed what I already knew. Marissa had made her decision. And she wanted me out, not just physically, but permanently. Behind the door was the life I had built piece by piece. The hardwood floors I laid myself over a sweaty summer. The couch we picked after 3 arguments in the middle of a discount warehouse. My wedding photo, the one she swore she'd never take down, probably tossed into some donation box or worse, buried in the trash like the rest of me. Then came the voice I wasn't ready for. Her mother, Elaine. "You brought this on yourself," she called out from the living room window, not even bothering to move the curtain aside. Her voice was sharp, cold, unforgiving. As if I were a criminal instead of a man begging for the life he'd once owned. No sign of Marissa. Not a glimpse. Just Elaine's words hanging in the air like smoke from a fire I hadn't lit but was expected to take the blame for. I sat on the top step, suitcase beside me, the weight of humiliation pressing down harder than the luggage ever could. My phone buzzed. Another message from my landlord about the studio apartment over someone's garage. I hadn't told him yet that I was officially homeless. The worst part? I wasn't even surprised. In the span of 3 weeks, I had been erased. Not just removed, but rewritten. Marissa told everyone who would listen that I cheated, that I drained our savings account, that I walked out on her during the hardest season of her life. She painted herself as the abandoned, the betrayed, the innocent. And they believed her. Photos of her crying, clutching our wedding album like a grieving widow, began to appear on her social media. The captions? "He left us with nothing. I guess love doesn't matter to some people. How do you recover from someone walking away?" It was brilliant, really, her performance. Crocodile tears paired with curated heartbreak. Every like and comment added a brick to the wall she was building around the version of me she created. But what no one knew, what I never told anyone, was that I had kept everything. Not because I planned for any of this. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I knew Marissa. I kept voicemails. Long, rambling ones she left after too much wine, admitting to things she swore never happened. I kept bank statements, even after she begged me to toss them, statements showing her midnight transfers, the overdrafts she blamed on me. I kept screenshots of text messages, late-night messages to clients that didn't read like business. And I kept the letter. The letter was the worst part. Not because of what it said, but because of the way she handed it to me, folded perfectly, slipped into my lunch bag like it was a sweet note. I found it hours later, in a break room filled with vending machine smells and flickering fluorescent lights. One sentence burned more than the rest. "Don't come back until you're a real man." That line dug in deeper than any lie she told to the world. Because I had spent years being a real man, by every possible definition. I worked 2 jobs. I built our credit back up after her shopping addictions. I sat through couples therapy even though she missed half the sessions. I covered for her absences. I explained away her tantrums. And I did it all because I loved her, or maybe, more honestly, because I was afraid of what she'd become if I didn't. So I didn't go back. Not after that letter. Not after she shut the door on me and changed the locks, literally and figuratively. I moved into that tiny studio. I found odd consulting gigs. I ghosted from social circles that used to be mine. I became a footnote in a narrative I didn't write, a villain in a story that made her look like a saint. But I watched. Quietly. I didn't defend myself. Not on Facebook. Not in whispered phone calls. Not even when my own sister believed the lies and cut me off. I let the storm rage, and I rebuilt under it. And then, 10 years later, just when the past had started to fade into something dull and distant, I saw it. Her engagement announcement. There she was, in white again, standing next to a man I didn't recognize but already disliked. Her caption, "After pain comes healing. After lies comes truth. Here's to forever." That word, truth, didn't just sting. It woke something in me. And for the first time in a decade, I looked at that old suitcase, still in my closet, and unzipped it. Inside, everything I never said was waiting. And now? Now I was ready to speak. The rumors moved faster than I ever could. Within a week of Marissa's curated heartbreak going public, my name became synonymous with disgrace. It started with whispers at the local diner where I'd stop in for coffee. The usual waitress, Trish, who used to slide me extra napkins with doodles of sunflowers, suddenly avoided eye contact. One morning she brought my order without a word, then turned away like I'd burned her. I knew the look. I'd worn it myself in the mirror, pity dressed up as disgust. Then came the job. I was 3 years into a management role at a regional shipping firm. Stable, respected, nothing flashy, but it kept me afloat. That was until Troy, the ever-righteous brother-in-law, paid a visit to my office. The same Troy who once begged me to help him cover rent during law school now stood across from my boss, whispering poison into ears too eager to listen. That afternoon, I was called in for a performance review I hadn't requested. By morning, I was unemployed. Company image is everything, they said. With the accusations, well, you understand. Yes. I understood. I understood that truth mattered less than perception. That guilt was whatever made people most comfortable. And right now, my guilt was convenient. My fall was entertainment. And Marissa? She was the star of the tragedy, the wounded heroine. Her mother, Elaine, didn't stop at the locks or the porch scolding. She took the crusade to church, of all places. Claimed I stole from the collection plate during our volunteer days. Never mind that I was the one who insisted on tithing every month, even when we could barely afford groceries. Her voice trembled as she told the congregation how heartbroken she was, how betrayed they all felt. And the worst part? They nodded. They swallowed every word like gospel. There were days I couldn't even walk down the grocery aisle without feeling eyes on my back. Not just eyes, judgment, condemnation. I'd reach for bread and hear the hushed voice behind me say, "That's him, the one who cheated, left her with nothing." Every time I heard it, I wanted to scream, to yell that I hadn't drained a single cent, that she had my card more than I did, that half those overdrafts came from impulse orders, spa charges, and late-night luxury buys in the name of branding. But I didn't yell. Not yet. Even Janelle, my own sister, washed her hands of me. She sent one message. Just one. You humiliated her. And us. No explanation. No space for defense. Just judgment and the sound of a door slamming shut over text. I remember staring at the screen for a long time, rereading that sentence until it lost its shape, until it stopped being words and became just another wound. But none of them knew. Not really. They didn't see the nights I came home after midnight from job number 2, only to find Marissa sipping wine with some new client. Always male. Always just a little too familiar. They didn't hear the fights, the ones whispered behind bedroom doors, full of desperate pleading and gaslight apologies. They didn't sit with me in the dark while I balanced a budget she'd already blown, trying to cover us until the next paycheck came in. They didn't see the bounced checks, her signature, her handwriting. I did. Every overdraft, every declined card, I covered. Not because I was weak, not because I was stupid, but because I still believed that the woman I married was buried somewhere inside her. That maybe, if I worked harder, held on tighter, I could bring her back. But you can't rescue someone who doesn't want to be saved. And Marissa? She wanted something else entirely. Something shiny. Something curated. A life that looked like success, even if it was hollow at the core. And when I couldn't keep up with that illusion, she rewrote me out of the story. Recast me as the villain. So I moved into the studio above Mr. Kenner's garage. He was a kind old man who used to bring Marissa fresh tomatoes from his garden. He didn't ask questions when I showed up with just one suitcase. Just handed me the key and said, "You look tired, son. Come on in." The space was small. Bare walls. One window. A rusted sink that coughed whenever I turned the handle. But it was quiet. And it was mine. I spent my nights there sorting through the ashes of my life. Not out loud. Not with anger. Just silently, methodically. I pieced together my resume. Picked up freelance logistics gigs. Ate ramen more than any grown man should. I built something from nothing. Again. But I didn't forget. I kept the files. Every receipt. Every statement. Every screenshot. I didn't share them. Not with friends. Not online. Not even when I was called a thief to my face. I just added them to the folder I named Archive. And with every file, I let a part of the pain settle into something colder. Something sharper. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. But I was going to remember. And one day, they would too. It was accidental at first. The USB drive slipped out of an old jacket I hadn't worn since the spring Marissa and I imploded. It clattered onto the studio floor, half hidden under a laundry basket I hadn't gotten around to dealing with. I almost ignored it, just another forgotten relic from a life I no longer lived. But something about the way it landed, Something about the faint scratch on its surface made me pick it up. When I plugged it into the battered laptop I'd been surviving on, I didn't expect anything. Maybe old music, maybe photos. But what I found was a folder titled Voice Memos _ Backup. I clicked. A list of audio files loaded, each one labeled only by a date and time. And when I hit play on the first one, I heard her voice. Not the polished, performative voice she used for Instagram reels and church gatherings. This voice was slurred, teary, real. "I don't know why I keep doing this," she whispered through sobs. "If anyone knew." God, if anyone knew. There was silence, then a hiccup breath. "Don't tell anyone, please. Just cover for me like always. Like you always do." I sat frozen, the sound of her vulnerability washing over me in sharp contrast to the public persona she'd weaponized against me. I listened to another, then another. Arguments recorded late at night, her voice tight and accusatory, followed by broken apologies hours later. The pattern repeated like a cycle I hadn't even realized I'd lived inside for so long. Somewhere in between audio files, my fingers moved to a cloud storage site. I created an account, encrypted it, and gave it a name no one could trace. And then I uploaded everything. That was the beginning of the archive. I didn't stop with the voice memos. I went digging through email chains, saved voicemails, screenshots I'd taken in the heat of the moment but never deleted. All of it. Every instance where she'd asked me to lie, cover, excuse, went into that folder. Bank statements showing large transfers from our joint account to a boutique spa in New York, under her name. Canceled rent checks signed by her hand, not mine. Photos of packages. Designer clothes and branding gear, stacked at our door even when she told people we were struggling. But it wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about truth. I started compiling messages from friends she'd turned against me. Messages they sent me long before the fallout. "Marissa's being kinda wild lately, huh?" One friend had texted. She told me she didn't come home last night, that she was at a hotel with clients. They hadn't believed their own words then, but I saved them, just in case. And then there was the therapy log. Our last therapist had emailed me a transcript of our final session, at my request. Marissa had stormed out halfway through, claiming the therapist was biased. But not before dropping a few bombs. "I didn't marry someone exciting," she said. "I married someone safe. Someone who could clean up my messes." That line went into the archive too. What struck me most as I curated it all was how easily she had painted me as the villain while leaving behind a trail of her own chaos. I was the fallback plan, the fixer, the one who stayed while she tore things down and blamed me for the rubble. There was even a video, one I forgot existed, recorded on her birthday. I'd set up a dinner at home after she canceled plans last minute, claiming she wanted something low-key. She got drunk instead, and while I cleaned up her untouched food, she slurred into the camera she didn't know was recording. "I wish I'd married someone useful," she laughed to whoever was on the phone. "Someone who wasn't just background noise." I watched that clip 3 times before saving it. And still, I didn't share it. Not with Janelle. Not with the few old friends I still had numbers for. I didn't even replay it for the sake of catharsis. I just archived it, sealed it with encryption, and closed the laptop. There's a silence that comes after betrayal. Not the kind that screams or smashes plates, but the kind that settles into your bones and makes you meticulous. Precise. You stop shouting into the void and start documenting instead. Because one day, the void might answer. I didn't know what I was going to do with it all. I wasn't plotting revenge, at least not in the traditional sense. I wasn't going to show up at her house screaming or try to expose her on some social feed. I didn't need attention. I needed clarity. I needed proof that I hadn't imagined it all, that the years I spent drowning weren't just figments of a bitter ex-husband's memory. The archive was that proof. A timeline. A ledger of truth against the debt of lies. I kept building it quietly. When I wasn't working freelance jobs or fixing the leaky faucet in my rental, I added new entries. I labeled them meticulously. Gaslighting, August 18th. Financials, joint account withdrawals. Therapy quote, Marissa admits manipulation. I didn't know when I'd use it, or how, but I knew this much. The truth has a shelf life, and one day, it would be ready to be served. Cold. 10 years. That's how long it had been since I last stood in a room with anyone who still bore Marissa's last name. 10 years since I buried my old life under dust, concrete, and enough silence to keep my sanity intact. In that time, I rebuilt, not just financially, but spiritually, psychologically. I kept my head down. I traveled, consulted, bought properties under an alias. I worked for firms that paid in 5 digits per week and left no digital footprint. I told myself I didn't care, that what was done. And then one morning, the past knocked. It came through a text from a number I hadn't saved but recognized instantly. Alyssa. She'd been our next-door neighbor back then, 16, bright-eyed, always dropping off banana bread and asking questions about business school. She was grown now, a mom, married, and apparently still checking in from time to time. Her message was short. You see this? Beneath it, a link. Curiosity has a way of seeping into your bloodstream before you can resist. My thumb hovered for a breath too long, then tapped. The web page loaded slowly, bad signal in the studio, but once it did, I felt my stomach shift. There she was, Marissa, in a flowy, off-white gown, holding hands with a man I'd never seen before. His smile was smug, like he owned the camera. Her eyes sparkled the way they only did when she thought she was winning. The caption below the image nearly choked me. We said yes to forever. Damien and Marissa, 11.11. Engagement party at Bellist Hall. To new beginnings, surrounded by love, family, and truth. Truth. That word. Like a slap wrapped in silk. As if everything that came before him, before this curated version of her life, had been a mistake worth erasing. She stood there smiling, framed by pastel balloons and wine glasses, the same way she did at our anniversary party in that exact same venue nearly 12 years ago. Bellist Hall. A converted estate turned event center. She loved the garden, the chandeliered ballroom, the curved staircase she said made her feel like royalty. Now she was walking those same stairs with another man. And the world, apparently, was celebrating. I closed the page, sat in the quiet of my studio. The old ceiling fan hummed like an old friend trying to break the silence, but it was no use. My pulse ticked loud in my ears. Not from heartbreak, not anymore, but from something else. Something I hadn't felt in a decade. Readiness. I got up, pulled out the suitcase from under my bed. Not the one I traveled with. The old one. The one I hadn't touched since I left Marissa's house. Locks changed, pride shredded. I clicked it open. Inside, nestled between faded shirts and half-forgotten papers, was the file. The archive. I moved it to my desk. Opened the laptop. Entered the encrypted password without thinking. The files greeted me like a choir of ghosts I'd kept on mute for too long. Voicemails. Screenshots. The bank statements. The therapy transcript. Her birthday rant video. All of it, waiting patiently. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction. What I felt was timing. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about balance. About taking back a narrative that had been yanked from my throat and twisted into something unrecognizable. I didn't need to hurt her. I just needed the truth to breathe. So I went to work. I created a duplicate flash drive. Clean. Labeled. Simple. Then I drafted an RSVP under a fake name, Marcus Langley. It sounded distinguished enough to pass the guest list check, but forgettable enough that no one would blink twice. When the prompt asked for dietary restrictions, I smiled and typed. No dairy, but plenty of receipts. The day the confirmation arrived, I poured myself a glass of scotch I'd been saving since my first 6-figure contract. I toasted nothing. I just stood by the window, watching the city exhale under golden afternoon light. I wasn't going to crash the party. I was going to deliver a reckoning. A quiet one, dressed in a tailored suit. No shouting, no accusations, just receipts, played out on the same kind of screen she used to lie about me. Poetic. The plan wasn't revenge. It was record correction, a recalibration. She chose that venue thinking the past was buried beneath marble floors and floral centerpieces. She thought if she wore white again, the world would believe it was her first time being innocent. She forgot that ghosts don't rest just because you don't speak their names. And me? I was the ghost she tried to forget. And I RSVP'd. I didn't drive straight to Bellhurst Hall. Something in me needed to take a detour, a piece of unfinished business I couldn't ignore any longer. 10 years of silence might have kept the peace, but they didn't offer closure. And if I was going to walk into that ballroom with the weight of my truth in one pocket and a flash drive in the other, I needed one thing first: my sister. Janelle. We hadn't spoken in 8 years. Not since her last message. You humiliated her. And us. I reread it so many times in those early days, it started to feel like scripture. Cold, final, unforgiving. But she hadn't known then. None of them did. and I hadn't defended myself, not even to her. Until now. Her house was different than I remembered. She'd moved a few towns over, into a neighborhood with carefully trimmed hedges and kids on scooters. The kind of place people move to when they want their lives to look stable, even if everything inside's unraveling. I parked across the street, sat there for a few seconds, staring at her porch. My hands tightened around the steering wheel, unsure if I was ready. But I thought of everything I'd carried. Not just the files, but the silence. The way it curved my spine after years of trying to hold up other people's lies. I'd carried it alone for too long. When I knocked, I half expected the door to stay closed. Or worse, to open and be met with the same old judgment. But when it did creak open, I saw her. My sister. Older. Softer around the eyes. Still Janelle. Her mouth opened slightly. "You're alive," I offered with a dry smile. "Yeah, that part never changed." She blinked a few times, then stepped back. "Come in." The inside smelled like cinnamon and lemon cleaner. She had photos on every wall. Her kids, her husband, her church volunteer group. I scanned the room and spotted none of me. Not surprising. We sat at the kitchen table, the silence between us thick with unsaid things. Finally, she broke it. "I thought you moved to South America." I almost laughed. "That's what they told you, huh?" She gave a small shrug. "You vanished. No calls. No explanations." I leaned back. Would it have mattered? You already decided who I was. Janelle looked down, her hands twisting the corner of a dish towel. She was family. I believed her. "And I was your brother," I said, the words heavier than I meant them to be. "And I never asked you to pick sides. But you did." She didn't argue. That was something. I reached into my coat and slid the flash drive across the table. "What's that?" "Proof," I said quietly. "Not stories. Not gossip. Just facts. From bank statements to voicemails. The things Marissa had never let anyone hear." She didn't move to touch it. "Why now?" I looked her in the eye. "Because I'm tired of being erased." That finally made her reach. She plugged it into her laptop, and I watched as her face slowly changed. Her eyes scanned Marissa's signed withdrawals, the overdraft notices, the therapy notes. Then she clicked the audio files. Marissa begging me not to tell anyone, confessing to spending sprees, begging me to fix her messes like always. Janelle pressed pause halfway through the third file. Her hands were shaking. "She said you cheated. Said you emptied the accounts and left her struggling." "She said a lot of things," I said. "And you believed them because it was easier than asking me." Her lips parted, but no defense came out. Only a breath. Then another. "She said you ruined her life." I stood up, my voice steady. "But she ruined mine." She didn't say sorry. Not yet. But her eyes were wet, and that was enough. I reached into my coat again and handed her a second flash drive. "Keep it. And if you care at all about the truth, you'll want to be at the engagement party." Her brows furrowed. "Engagement? Bellist Hall. Marissa and some new guy. Damien." She moved on. She built a whole new life on top of the one she set on fire. Janelle looked down at the drive, then up at me. "And what are you going to do?" I smiled faintly. "Tell the truth. That's all." Her voice was quiet. It might break her. I tilted my head. Then maybe she shouldn't have lied. We stood there in the stillness of her kitchen. No dramatic hugs. No long-winded apologies. Just a shared truth, finally sitting between us instead of miles of silence. As I reached the door, Janelle called out softly, "I'll be there." I nodded once, not turning around. "Then you'll finally see what I lived through." And with that, I stepped out into the evening, feeling lighter, not because the past was gone, but because it was finally ready to speak. The valet barely looked at me as I stepped out of the black sedan. Just another guest in a sea of tailored suits and polished shoes. I handed him the keys with a nod, adjusted my cufflinks, and stared up at the looming arches of Bellhurst Hall. 10 years. A full decade since I last walked through those doors, my arm wrapped around Marissa's waist, a single red rose tucked behind her ear. We had celebrated 5 years of marriage here. I'd reserved the ballroom as a surprise. She said it was the most romantic thing I'd ever done. And now she was back, wearing white again. But this time, I wasn't the man at her side. I entered the building like a shadow, gliding past the check-in desk with my forged RSVP and calm nod. The event planner glanced at my name, Marcus Langley, and waved me in with a bored smile. I blended into the hum of violins and champagne chatter, the echo of heels clicking against marble. The ballroom hadn't changed. Gold linens draped over round tables. Crystal chandeliers winked above, casting soft light over the sea of socialites and smiling liars. Marissa stood near the front, bathed in spotlight and attention. She wore a shimmering champagne-colored gown that clung to her like a secret. Her laugh rang out across the room, just loud enough to be heard over the music but still soft enough to sound effortless. Damien hovered at her side, square jaw, perfect hair, a glass of expensive wine in his hand. He had the look of a man who believed in his own myth. I hung near the back, unnoticed, dressed in a fitted black suit and tie that matched the tone of my purpose. I scanned but didn't linger. That was the gift of obscurity. I'd spent years mastering invisibility. Tonight, it would serve me well. A toast was announced. The room hushed as Damien clinked his glass. Thank you all for coming to celebrate this incredible new chapter with us. Love is a journey, and tonight we honor the journey, Al. Of resilience, of rediscovery, of truth. There it was again. Truth. That word was being abused tonight like it owed them something. I gripped the flash drive in my pocket, feeling the smooth metal press against my palm. My heartbeat didn't spike. My breathing didn't falter. I had rehearsed this in my head too many times to be rattled now. Marissa stepped forward, beaming. We're not perfect people, she began, placing her hand gently on Damien's. But we've come through fire and found each other on the other side. When someone walks away, you can fall apart, or you can grow. And I chose growth. Applause erupted. Warm, polite, eager to reward resilience, even if it was a lie. Then came the tribute reel. The lights dimmed. The projector flickered to life, casting their story onto a massive white wall like some curated documentary. Footage of Marissa baking in her spotless kitchen. Marissa handing out blankets at a shelter. Marissa smiling through hard times, staring out at the sea like a woman who'd survived a war instead of started one. The final slide read, Love After Pain, a story of triumph. The crowd stood, applauding. A few women wiped tears. Damien kissed her hand. Marissa stepped up to the microphone again. When someone leaves you, you don't cry. You rise. That was when I moved. I walked with purpose through the narrow aisle between tables. Heads turned, polite confusion rippling like wind through wheat. I reached the edge of the stage, where an assistant tried to stop me with a gentle hand. I didn't shove. I didn't push. I simply looked at her and said, I'm part of the tribute. She just forgot to include me. Then I climbed the stairs. Marissa turned at the sound of my footsteps. Her face lost color faster than a photo left in the sun. Damien looked confused. The audience quieted, murmurs building like a tide pulling back before a wave. I took the microphone, straightened my jacket, and looked out at them, all the believers, the enablers, the blind. Hi, I said, calm and clear. I'm the ex-husband she forgot to invite. A few laughs. Nervous. One person gasped. Damien's jaw tightened. Marissa reached for the mic. You need to leave. But I raised my hand. Please. Just a few minutes. Since this is a night for truth, I'd like to share mine. Then I clicked the remote. The projector screen flickered again. But this time, it wasn't curated footage. It was raw. Untouched. A voicemail played first, her voice, shaking. Babe, I overdraft again. Can you just cover it and don't tell my mom? The room held its breath. Next slide. Signed withdrawals from our joint account. Thousands missing. Her signature. Her handwriting. Then came the screenshots, messages to her branding clients that read more like love notes than business. The therapy transcript followed. I didn't marry someone exciting. I married someone safe. Someone who could clean up my messes. People started whispering. Someone dropped a glass. Troy, her brother, stood at the edge of the crowd, pale and still. Finally, I ended with the birthday video. She was drunk, laughing to a friend off screen. I wish I'd married someone useful, not someone who just holds my purse while I shine. I didn't speak after that. I didn't need to. The applause was gone. And silence? It was louder than any standing ovation. The room wasn't silent, it was suspended. Like the collective air had been sucked out, and no one remembered how to breathe. The last frame of the slideshow still lingered behind me on the projector screen. Marissa, half drunk, eyes glazed, muttering that I was just a dumb fallback. Amanda held her purse while she basked in the spotlight. Her words, not mine. I stood at the edge of the stage and let the weight of it settle. The shock, the truth, the humiliation that had once been mine now hanging around her like a second skin. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't angry. I was calm, eerily so, like a man who'd been underwater too long and finally broke the surface. Marissa still hadn't moved. Damien stepped forward first, his voice tight. What is this? Who the hell do you think you are? I turned to him. I'm the man she left behind. The man she destroyed to get here. I glanced out at the crowd. But I'm also the man who kept every receipt. A few scattered gasps. A woman in the front row whispered something to her husband, who turned and looked directly at Marissa. Her smile was gone. Her posture, once confident and graceful, had shrunk. She looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. She finally spoke, her voice brittle. This isn't the time or the place. I raised the mic again. Funny. That's exactly what I thought when she told people I cheated. When she drained our accounts and claimed I abandoned her. When her mother told the church I stole from the offering plate. My eyes scanned the crowd. But that didn't stop her. She told her story loud and proud. I figured, maybe it's time mine got told too. You're bitter, she hissed. You're pathetic. No, I said. I'm done being quiet. The screen behind me shifted to the final slide. One sentence, white text on black. Don't come back until you're a real man. Her letter. The one she left tucked in my lunch bag the day she locked me out. The audience read it in silence. A few mouths formed the words as they processed them, slowly, like decoding a message they weren't meant to see. Someone to my right said aloud, she told us he ran. And just like that, the dam broke. A man at a table near the front stood up. That's fraud. Those withdrawals. He could sue. A woman next to him muttered, she made us think she was the victim. I sent her money. Another voice, familiar, cut through the growing chaos. Everything he's saying is true. Janelle. She stood near the back, dressed in dark blue, her voice shaking but clear. I saw the files. The recordings. She lied to all of us. Marissa spun to her, eyes wide. Janelle? What are you doing? What you never expected, my sister said. I'm telling the truth. More murmurs. More eyes. The narrative was cracking, splintering like glass. I could see Damien reeling, his eyes darting between Marissa, the projector, and the crowd like a man suddenly realizing he'd been handed a counterfeit life. Troy tried to cut in, stepping toward me with his attorney swagger. This is defamation. You're crossing a line. Save it, I said, holding up a second flash drive. I brought extra copies. Signed receipts, voicemails, video, therapy transcripts, all verified. So go ahead. Call it defamation. We can settle it in court if you'd like. But I doubt Damien's firm will enjoy the headlines. Troy stopped mid-step. For the first time in years, he looked uncertain. I turned back to the crowd. I don't want applause. I don't want pity. I don't even want justice. I just want you all to stop pretending. She didn't build a life after betrayal. She built it on lies. And tonight, I just wanted you to see it. The microphone whined slightly as I set it down on the stage floor. My job was done. I didn't need to stay and pick up the pieces. That was never my role. I was always the one left behind with the dustpan, sweeping up the glass after someone else smashed it. But not tonight. Tonight, I was the storm. I walked off stage with every eye tracking me. Some full of guilt. Some awe. Others horror. Let them sit with it. Let them sort through what was real and what they helped her hide. That wasn't my burden anymore. As I reached the side door of the ballroom, I passed Damien. He stood stiff, jaw clenched, staring at the image still frozen on screen behind me. He didn't speak, but his grip on the wine glass was tight enough that I heard it crack just as I pushed open the door. Behind me, the room erupted, not in applause, but in questions. Accusations. Confusion. Truth. And for the first time in a decade, I wasn't the one being blamed. I was the one being heard. The first scream I heard after I stepped through the side door wasn't mine, it was Marissa's. Muffled by thick walls, but sharp enough to cut through the air like a razor. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The truth was already doing its work. I walked down the long, stone-lined hallway that led to the valet exit, each footstep echoing behind me like a slow drumroll. My suit felt a little looser than when I walked in, lighter, somehow. Not because anything had changed physically, but because I'd shed something heavier than fabric. Silence. 10 years of carrying other people's lies, hidden like weight in my lungs, and now they were out in the open, taking their first breath. Behind me, the walls of Marissa's fantasy were crumbling. I paused at the glass doors leading to the courtyard. From that vantage point, I could still see inside the ballroom, just barely. Through the arched window, the once adoring crowd was now a confused swarm. Some were arguing. Others, walking out. Damien was speaking to an older man in a crisp gray suit, his father, I assumed, who had a hand on his shoulder and a tight, displeased expression on his face. I saw Elaine standing near the dessert table, mouth open in disbelief, clutching a wine glass with white knuckles. She didn't look furious. She looked cornered. Troy was pacing, phone in hand, no doubt trying to figure out damage control. But the damage was already bleeding out in all directions. And in the middle of it all stood Marissa, still frozen, still watching the screen where her letter burned like an indictment. The guests didn't cheer anymore. No one wiped away tears of joy. There were no raised glasses, no smiles, just silence. The same silence I had been left with all those years ago, now echoing off the ballroom walls like a curse returned to cinder. I stepped outside and let the chill hit my face. The stars were brighter than I expected for a city sky. I stood there for a while, hands in my pockets, the sharpness of the night grounding me. I didn't feel triumphant. Not exactly. I didn't feel vindicated or righteous. I felt steady. The truth doesn't come with a parade. It doesn't always taste sweet. Sometimes it burns going down. But it stays down. It doesn't dissolve. It roots itself. My phone buzzed. A message from Janelle. She's unraveling. I didn't respond. What could I say? Good? Told you? Instead, I watched the ballroom lights flicker behind the curtains and thought about what unraveling really meant. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was exposure. When your lies are peeled back and your skin is still expected to smile. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Eventually, people began spilling out. Quiet. Hurried. Some still holding half-empty champagne flutes. Others angrily shaking their heads. One woman muttered to her husband, "She scammed us. And she wanted our blessing?" He said nothing, just kept walking. Another group hovered by the valet station, whispering urgently. The DJ had gone silent. The fairy tale had no soundtrack anymore. Janelle emerged shortly after. She walked toward me slowly, hands wrapped tightly around her purse. That was surreal. I raised an eyebrow. That's one word for it. She didn't deny any of it, she said. Not once. When people confronted her, when they asked why she lied, she just stood there. Like she didn't know what planet she was on. I didn't need to hear it. I could picture it perfectly. Marissa wasn't built to be confronted. She was built for adoration, for applause. She knew how to cry on cue and turn accusations into sympathy. But this? Cold? Hard proof? That wasn't a stage she could command. She called you a coward, Janelle added. Said you ambushed her. I let out a short breath of amusement. Funny how truth feels like an ambush when you've spent a decade building a lie. Janelle stepped closer. What happens now? Whatever needs to, I said. I didn't do this for revenge. I did it so the record would be set straight. For me. For you. For anyone who ever believed her by default. She looked at me differently then. Not like a brother she had written off, but like someone rising from a fog. I'm sorry, she said quietly. For not asking. For not trusting you. I nodded. You weren't the only one. From behind us came the distant sound of a raised voice, Marissa's, shouting at Troy. Accusing someone, probably everyone, of betrayal. The irony nearly made me laugh. She built an empire on my ashes and called herself a phoenix. But tonight, the fire wasn't hers. It belonged to the truth. I should go, Janelle said. I think Damien's canceling the engagement. His family was already talking to lawyers. Good, I said, without spite. Let him get out while he still can. She looked at me one last time. You did what most people wouldn't have the guts to do. I shrugged. I just pressed play. And as she walked away into the night, heels clicking softly on the stone path, I turned back to the door, gave Belhurst Hall one final glance, and walked into the darkness, where, for once, I felt nothing but light. I didn't need to return to the ballroom. I didn't need to see Marissa's face again or witness the final implosion of the fantasy she had crafted so carefully. I had already seen enough from the outside to know what was coming. The way people stormed out, head shaking. The murmurs. The way Damien looked at her as if she were suddenly a stranger. It wasn't a party anymore. It was a reckoning. I drove back to the city in silence. No music. No news. Just the sound of the tires humming against the pavement and my own breath, steady now, in a way it hadn't been in years. My phone lit up a few times, messages from unknown numbers, probably guests trying to reach me. Apologies. Shock. Maybe even admiration disguised as curiosity. I ignored them all. It wasn't about them. It never had been. The next morning, I woke up to find the internet already doing what it does best, digging. My name didn't trend, thankfully. I had been careful, but Marissa's did. Screenshots from the party had leaked. Someone had filmed part of the slideshow on their phone. A clip of her drunken birthday rant surfaced within hours. People were comparing it to her older videos, the ones where she cried on camera about being abandoned, The ones with captions like, "He left us with nothing." Now, those same posts were being flooded with comments. "This aged badly. Where's the apology to your ex? We believed you." Her follower count plummeted in real time. Every time I refreshed her page, it was lower. Brand sponsors began quietly deleting old posts they'd shared of her products. The skincare line she launched 2 years ago? Gone. Website offline. Comments disabled. I watched it happen with the same detached calm I'd carried into the ballroom. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't smiling. This wasn't satisfaction, it was balance. She'd spent a decade thriving off the narrative she sold everyone. Betrayed wife, brave survivor, businesswoman rebuilt from ashes. Now the ashes were real. And this time, they were hers. Janelle called me around noon. "She's locked her accounts," she said. "Damien ended the engagement this morning. His family issued a statement. Legal language, lots of material misrepresentation, and reputational harm. She's threatening to sue anyone who shares the video." "Let her try," I said. "She won't win," Janelle added. "The evidence you showed, it's bulletproof. And everyone saw it. There's no undoing it." "No," I said. "There isn't." For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, quietly, "Do you feel better?" I looked out the window. The ocean shimmered below my balcony. Waves crashing against rocks, steady and unapologetic. I thought about everything I'd lost, my home, my reputation, my voice, and everything I'd quietly rebuilt since then. "No," I said, "but I feel lighter." Later that afternoon, an email came through. From a small podcast I'd never heard of. True Relationship Crime. They wanted an exclusive interview. They'd seen the footage, followed the trail. They said my story could help others who'd been falsely accused, manipulated, erased. I deleted the email. I wasn't interested in making a career out of this. Marissa tried to build her identity off the wreckage of mine. I wasn't going to return the favor, but I did keep watching. A week passed. Then 2. The news cycle rolled on, but the fallout lingered. People who had once praised her were now apologizing to me, some privately, some publicly. A few admitted they always thought something didn't add up but didn't want to question a survivor. That word had shielded her like armor. But it only worked until the truth cut through. The most surprising message came from one of her old friends, Liza, the one who had once posted a photo with her and captioned it, "Surround yourself with women who rise from ashes." Liza's message read, "I'm sorry. We all let her tell the story without asking why yours was never heard. You didn't deserve that." I didn't respond. Not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need to anymore. Marissa disappeared from public view. No new posts. No interviews. No statements. Just gone. Janelle called again. "They're saying she moved out of state. Staying with a cousin. She's not well." I didn't ask for details. I didn't care. She had always known what she was doing. Every lie, every staged photo, every crocodile tear. She chose the story she wanted the world to believe, and she sold it with the confidence of a born performer. But the truth has a long memory. It waits. It collects interest. And when it finally arrives, it does so without permission. Marissa thought I was gone forever. That she could bury the man she left behind and never be held accountable for the life she stole from him. But I didn't stay buried. I kept the shovel. I kept the records. I kept the silence. And when the time came, I let the truth speak louder than I ever could. The fairy tale didn't just collapse. It exposed the foundation it was built on. And all I had to do was stop protecting the person who tore me down. I didn't stay for the aftermath. I didn't linger in comment sections or refresh news feeds. I didn't gloat, didn't message old friends to say I told you so. That's not what this was ever about. When I stepped away from Belhist Hall and into the night air, I left something behind. A version of myself. The man who waited for people to believe him. The man who explained and justified and begged for his name back. That man no longer existed. A week after the engagement party, Janelle called again. Her voice was a mixture of disbelief and exhaustion. "She's gone." "Gone?" I asked, though I already knew what she meant. "She packed up, disappeared. Someone said she flew out to Arizona. Others say she's with a cousin in Vermont. No one knows for sure. She shut everything down. Her social media pages were wiped clean. No more faux poetic captions or carefully filtered selfies. The skincare brand she once hawked in every other post had officially terminated their contract, issuing a bland but final statement about discrepancies in personal conduct. Damien's family moved fast too. Papers were filed, engagement terminated. The wedding that never was, canceled before invitations were even mailed. Janelle told me Marissa hadn't said a word to her. Not one text. Not one call. Even Elaine, once so proud and loud in her defense, had retreated into her house and, reportedly, left her church group. Shame has a way of silencing even the most sanctimonious mouths. She's not going to come after you, Janelle said. Too many people know the truth now. She'd lose. I wasn't worried, I said. And I wasn't. Not because I believed she couldn't try, but because there was nothing left for her to win. I hadn't humiliated her. I hadn't twisted the knife. I'd simply laid the truth bare and let the people around her see what had been hiding behind the curtain all along. I went back to work. Quietly. I consulted for a tech logistics company in Toronto, then flew to Lisbon for a short-term contract. My life, my real life, had never depended on her apology. It had grown in the quiet places where no one thought to look. It had taken root in studios and small jobs, in long nights of building and saving and rebuilding again. And now, I was home. A modest condo overlooking the coast. Nothing ostentatious. Just clean lines, sea air, and silence I wasn't afraid of anymore. I filled my days with work, books, early morning runs, and the slow, intentional act of living. Some mornings I woke up thinking about the years I'd lost, but most days, I just felt grateful I wasn't still living them. In my office, there's one framed item on the wall. No diplomas. No certificates. Just a single page behind glass, yellowed with time, creased at the corners. The letter. Don't come back until you're a real man. Marissa had written it in her neat, slanted cursive. Probably thought it was a dagger. A declaration. At the time, it broke me. I read it in the break room of a warehouse while eating lunch out of a plastic container, wondering how the hell I'd become a ghost in my own marriage. Now, it serves a different purpose. It reminds me of how far I came back from. It reminds me of who I used to be, and how easily I gave myself away to someone who saw me as background noise in her spotlight. Someone who measured manhood by credit scores and curated images. Someone who only loved the version of me that was useful, not the one that was real. I didn't hang the letter to hold onto the pain. I framed it as a receipt. Because silence isn't always noble. Sometimes, it's complicit. And the bravest thing I ever did wasn't gathering the evidence. It was speaking. It was standing on that stage, with my hands steady and my heart calm, and saying, enough. In the end, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need anyone to clap for me. I just needed to reclaim my voice. And now I have it. People still whisper sometimes. Some still believe the version of events they're most comfortable with. But that's the thing about truth, it doesn't need everyone's approval to be valid. It just needs to be spoken. And when it is, it echoes. I get messages occasionally, strangers, mostly. Men, women. People who saw the video and found something in it that reminded them of their own story. Some are still in the storm. Others, like me, are on the other side. They thank me. Say it helped them find clarity. Find courage. Sometimes even closure. I respond to a few. Not many. I don't offer advice. Just one line, always the same. Keep the receipts. One day, they'll speak for you. Then I close the laptop. Return to my coffee. My peace. My sunrise. Because after everything, that's the one thing I never take for granted anymore. A morning without lies. And a name I didn't have to steal back, because it was mine all along.